George, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
Okay. Call the order of a work session of Goodyear City Council for September 2007. All council members are in attendance or on the telephone. We have two items on our work session agenda. One is to receive the 2007 Citizen Satisfaction Survey, and the other is changes to the Estrella general plan. No, our general plan from Estrella, and affecting not only Estrella but the Arizona Land Department. So we'll start with Paula on the Citizen Satisfaction Survey.
Mayor and Council, it's really an opportunity, and it's wonderful to stand up here and tell you things are still great. We did this survey in 2004, and there were about 37,000 people here then. Now there's 55,000. So I was just talking to Lori. I said 22,000 more people have come who could be unhappy and who aren't. Right? So
that's a good sign.
What this does look at, though, is as we do this, and we usually do it every other year, is that we need to see what people's perceptions are of the city. We know what we're doing. We need to know what the perceptions are out there of what we're doing, because perception is reality to our citizens. And so it's important for us to understand what they're thinking. I can't see it with my glasses, and I can't see it without, so we're going to work on this. 2001 and 2002, we basically did a survey, and Estrella Mountain Community College did it for us. In 2004 and now 2007, we did it with Behavior Research, a professional market research company. Every year we've done a survey of about 400 in the sample. Every time they have been random telephone surveys. They're conducted on evenings and weekends, so we get all the people. And they basically have a sampling error of 5%. So if you see a 6% difference between the answers among the total sample, then we can say it's a significant difference. If it's only 5, then it could be a sampling error. I've looked at most everything by area of the city. And when we look at things by area of the city, we only have sample sizes of about 100 to 150. When we're looking at those things, we need a good 12% to 15% difference in order to really know that it's significant. Basically, the ages of our respondents just shows that they were well distributed across all age ranges, and we had just about equal male and female. Now, the education levels. At the last survey, we had high education levels, and we were extremely pleased with that, and that hasn't changed. We have 81% of our households have a head of household that is college educated, and almost half have a college degree, and that is higher than most cities. Last time we did this, 70% of our population had not lived here more than 5 years. Now we're at the point, because the growth really started in the late 90s, so now we're at the point where half the population has lived here less than 5, less than 6, and the other more than 6, so we're on a pretty equal basis right now.
Paula, may I ask you if it's okay if we intersperse comments and questions as you speak?
Anytime.
So anybody wishes to comment or question, just do so. Okay.
As just in 2006, even with the additional people, we still have about half of our households with children, and those that do have children, they're evenly spread across age groups. The employment status of our respondents was about 53%, and the spouses 69%. When you ask annual income in any survey, that's the question that is refused more than any other. So 30% of the population refused it, and actually usually the higher the income, the more they tend to refuse. In this case, when you take those 30% out, we ended up with a 72.2 median income, with almost half of our households earning over $75,000 and 3/4 earning over $50,000. So that does verify that we have high income levels in our city.
Hey, Paula, could you repeat that one more time?
Almost half of our population has an income of more than $75,000 a year, and about 3/4 have a population of over 50,000.
Thank you.
The next chart hasn't changed since 2004 either, and I would say unfortunately. But with the new employment districts and everything that we're getting, this will soon change. About 3/4 of our people are still commuting well over 10 miles out. Most of that is probably out of Goodyear. And 50% of our population is still commuting over 20 miles one way every day. Now we can take a look at the survey results by area of the city. We basically looked at them by the north, which is pretty much Palm Valley and Pebble Creek, the central area down to the river, and those south of the river, which turns out to be all of Estrella. So when you look at this information, do you see the laser? You don't see the laser, do you?
Nope.
Okay. When you look at the red ones, that's your total sample. The green is the north, the blue is central, and the yellow is south. So when you look at the red sample, then that is where we need to see a 6% difference. When you look at either the green or the blue or the yellow, we need to see differences of about 12 to 15% to be significant. Okay, if you look at the results, the first thing we ask in very general questions, we say, how is Goodyear as a place to live? And those that gave excellent and good ratings said basically 90%. Last time 91%. And it's the same pretty much by all the areas, no change. Then we took a look and said, okay, how many gave excellent ratings versus good? Because, we want them all to give excellent ratings, don't we? I mean, we really want to say excellent. So when I started taking a look at this, I started noticing one thing, that the north always is the highest rated, usually followed by central, and then the south, Estrella, was always giving less excellent ratings than good versus the others. Now, they're still giving 90% and are still happy with the city. But if you really want to look and say, okay, let's take a little more in-depth look, that's how we look at it. Okay, now we're going to look at quality of life. We said, okay, what's the quality of life in the city? And again, you have 88% saying that it's excellent to good quality of life. Okay, now we're going to look at it from how many people said excellent versus good. There you see a difference again, more in the north than central, and a pretty dramatically low difference, and only 7% of those people in Estrella saying it's excellent. So I just think we need to be sort of looking at this and just thinking about it, because that does show that there's a little bit of a difference going on in frame of mind, maybe in Estrella. Okay, so next thing we said is, all right, now, what's the quality of life like in your neighborhood? All right, here again, 90% of the people are happy, said it's great, good or excellent. And that hasn't changed over since 2004. Again, we took a look at it by how many said excellent versus good. Now look at Estrella. When it comes to their neighborhood, they actually are rating it very high from that standpoint, a lot more excellent ratings. So I'd say they're just, Estrella's happier in their neighborhood than maybe they are in total with the city. Now, day-night, neighborhood safety. This is the one question that we were able to ask over 4 years and compare. We asked exactly the same way every time. And it's pretty phenomenal when you've gained since 2001, our population was like, 19,000 people, and now we're 55,000, and you still have 96% of your population saying that they feel safe or very safe during the day, and just a tad less, 90% at night. So I'd say this is phenomenal and says a lot of good things about our police department. And we took a look at this, too, by area, and you see because one of the things when we go to Estrella, and we've heard some things about their perception of crime in that area, so I wanted to look at that and see if maybe that was having an effect on maybe a little fewer excellent ratings, and it's really not very different down there. Okay, so what is the most important problem facing the city? Now, this is open-ended. We didn't give them anything, we didn't give them anything to choose from. We just said to them, what is the most important problem? And same thing as they said 3 years ago, growth, and the rapid growth. And the second was traffic congestion. Okay, and everything else got onesies or twosies, percents, except for services not keeping up and crime, only 8% this time versus 13% the previous year. And that is a significant difference. And so crime is not actually high on the radar of our people at this point. I think that's really great as the city grows.
It's just very open-ended. You're not asking people to
No,
quantify
totally
the growth or
open-ended.
qualify it.
No. We asked them about to rate on good or excellent, fair, poor, what they think of design, look, and quality overall of the commercial development that's being built here. I think we have 84% who said in that red total, good or excellent, and no difference between the areas of the city. So I think that's really a high rating for our people when you ask that broad of a question about the commercial. We also asked their opinion of the residential housing, like how are we doing on housing, and just less than half said we had exactly the right balance of housing, and if they had a criticism, it's that too many high-priced houses in our city. Now we're going to get to our services. So we say, okay, we start very broad and we drill down. What's your overall satisfaction with the services in our city? We looked at that by area. Here you see 99% back in 2004 said that it was good or excellent, and in 93% in 2007. So that is a bit of a decrease, but 93% is not bad at all, folks. And very little difference across cities until we get to Estrella, and there we do have a 15% decrease, and that is a significant difference in their perception of their overall satisfaction with our service levels from 2004 to 2007.
Was this survey done before or after we changed our garbage collection?
Oh, I should have said it. I'm sorry. We normally would do this in the fall. And so in 2004, we did it in the fall, and so we should have done it in 2006 fall. So I asked that it be delayed because that's when we were, in November of 2006 is when we were instituting the new garbage collection service, and fall of 2006 is also when we changed from City Report to In Focus. These are two major things that we do ask our citizens about. So we wanted to have at least 6 months of the service under their belt before we ask them questions about it. So we asked these in late May, early June, so there was almost 6 to 7 months that these services were in place. Okay. When I took a look again at the excellent versus good, or in this case it was satisfied versus very satisfied, you can see a difference in how many people said very satisfied in the other areas of our city versus those who said very satisfied in Estrella. And now we're going to drill down to those specific services. And the great news is that the top services, again, are fire, trash, and police, just as they were before we instituted the trash. The number one rated service in 2004 was the twice weekly trash collection. Now the once weekly trash collection is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth rated. 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth rated. So it's pretty darn good 6 months after a program where a lot of people thought they weren't going to like the service, that still trash is one of the most highly rated services, and I think that says a lot for our Public Works Department and how they instituted this program.
Did we ask about the? We talk about curbside recycling in this one, but in 04, did we ask about the regional recycling bins?
In 04, we did ask if they were using those.
Okay, but I mean, it wasn't in the same context of how well were we providing that service.
No, back then no, that wasn't part of this question. So the number one rated is fire protection, then followed by the bulk trash, and then the curbside recycling, paramedic services, the weekly curbside trash, cleanliness of our parks, and police protection. Then what we rated good on is stormwater runoff on the major streets, the condition of the park landscaping, neighborhood street repair, the amount of water pressure, communications with our residents, and our code compliance standards. What they said we were doing fairly good on is the amount of large community parks, street reconstruction, art and cultural events, attracting quality jobs to our community, and our water quality. And what they say we're only doing average on is traffic congestion on the major streets. And as we said before, they said one of the key, open-ended, one of the key problems is the traffic congestion. And what actually, because it's under 5, we should say we're not even doing average on is public transportation. Now, those numbers are no different than they were in 2004.
Is it possible on that public transportation to even scale it down into the zones of where people answered that from?
I do have that.
So, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I can get that for you.
Thank you.
All right. So then, now you see how they've rated on a 10-point scale. And the fact that only one of our services is under 5, I think that's really incredible. Having worked other places, trust me, that's really great. And that so many of them are up in the 7s and 8s, it really says a lot for our city and its services. Then you ask the next big question, and you mention the word taxes, and usually, ugh. So here we said, okay, so what's the value of the services for the property taxes you pay? And you have almost 80% of your population saying that you really have a good value for the money, good or excellent value. And so that's really remarkable. So I'm saying there's a lot of good news in here.
Do you think, okay, property taxes would be schools, CFDs, city tax, community college, the whole thing?
When we talked about it, we talked about just the city tax.
Plus, or including CFD, or no? No.
We'll get into that.
But
We didn't get that complicated.
I was going to say, I would venture to guess that the average person answering the question wouldn't discern.
But if they knew their taxes were another $1,000 or $2,000 higher, they may not answer it that way.
Maybe. It also varies by school district, so that's the problem, too, for how people are going to look at it. Then we ask about how well the city's services and their perception is how well the city's services are keeping up with that growth. Because they said, what's the biggest problem? Growth. Well, and the orange number up there should say 2004, not 2006. In 2007, they're saying they're rating it as 7.2, and it was 6.8 in 2004, so there's really no statistical difference between that based upon the growth. And if any area thinks that we're not doing quite as well, again, you see the South rates it lower than the other two areas, with no difference by age and no difference by whether they're newcomers. Then we asked for the importance of the city providing some services that we don't provide now, and this we gave them the answers. Ask us how important you think senior services are, how important you think library is. So in this case, as in the previous survey, senior services and library came out as the two most important services that they want. The next that would be considered important are connecting buses to, a lot of connecting bus routes so they can get to different areas. Park and ride facilities, express bus service to downtown, the dial-a-ride, and the multi-gen center. The ones that are somewhat important would be performing arts and aquatic center. And the one that basically is not considered too important by our people appears to be a BMX park. Now, we've got a lot of new amenities coming online in the city.
Georgia.
Yes?
This is Georgia. I only have one comment for my compatriots on the council, is to certainly take that into their thought processes on that where the citizens think it's very important to have a senior services as well as a multi-generational center with the library, since we've been talking so much about what we need in our city when we start the building of it. And I think that kind of answers. It's another confirmation of how the citizens feel of what their needs are for that city center.
Okay, thank you. We have a lot of new amenities coming online, and so we wanted to see what people, how important they thought this would be and how much these new amenities would improve their quality of life. And so if they gave it a rating of 10, that meant a great deal, really the highest. And so those that are up there toward the great deal is Library First, it's an 8.7, followed by Estrella Falls Mall, private colleges, and the city center, all those rated an 8 or above. Below that, in the 7 points, which still means it's going to make a big difference to their quality of life, is the Job Corridor, the Performing Arts Center, and our spring training facility.
Were those the only options
Those
given?
are the only ones that they were given. So I think from what that says is that of all the ones that we're doing, that are coming online in our city, well, I mean, we're not doing Estrella Falls exactly, but that they do believe that all of these are important. So,
Do they understand that the Performing Arts Center and the Multi-Gen Center will be pretty much the same thing? There will be one within the other?
no, and I'll show you why in just 1 second. The next slide.
It should be.
The jury's still out on that one.
Really? Yep.
When we ask what they want to see in a multi-gen center, the first things they want to see are classrooms, indoor gym, an indoor swimming pool, fitness equipment, an outdoor swimming pool, and then an auditorium with seats and a performing stage. And a lot of times that means a place for them to put on acts and stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have to be truly high tech. It just needs to be a stage like, say, at Tuscany and what ballrooms have. And as I said, an indoor running track, kitchens, ballrooms, kilns. Usually it's a place for crafts and physical activities and classroom activities.
Question on that, and it's probably not the right time to ask it, but I'll ask it anyway. Those indoor gyms, swim pools, fitness, outdoor, okay, those are all available in the city today through private resources. Lifetime Fitness, the Y, one across the street, Affinity, LA something or other in Avondale, and there's another one in Avondale. I mean, can we provide that service less expensively?
Should we?
I know that they're provided in many cities. I mean, Glendale, Mesa, Phoenix. Phoenix led with the multi-gen centers. I know the one in North Glendale is expensive. It's not cheap to join. It has all of these things in it. They have senior centers with a lot of these things in it, which are basically free to everybody. But I don't know that it would be as expensive as the others. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I think maybe Brian or somebody is here who's maybe looked into it. Anybody from Public Works?
And, for the senior citizens, many of them live in one community, which offers all those things free. So, I'm not sure that, in view of that with the limited resources we have available, that we need to be putting it into that.
But I think
It's a question.
Well, I think you got to ask yourself the question. I mean,
If you got a group of kids that are right here across the street from the city council chambers that want to have a pickup game of basketball in the middle of the summer at 110 degrees on 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and they got nowhere else to go, where are we going to send them? They can't afford Lifetime Fitness, maybe. They can't afford.
My comment, if you hear, is the central part of our city does not have those facilities. Am I correct in my observation?
No. Those facilities are available within a mile or two of virtually anything north of the river.
No, they're not.
Lifetime Fitness.
You telling me a kid at Ceraville Gardens has something within a mile?
I said a mile or two. That's about 3 miles.
I don't think they're looking at something you pay for. I think they're looking at a service that the city offers at no cost.
exactly.
Yeah,
Or-
but
or a
I'm not
limited
sure that
amount
the
of
city
cost.
can afford to offer that at no cost, is the point we have to think about. When it's available, because that is impacts our taxes, the citizens are paying for it one way or another, and when you already have the service available, and one of them is in the highest quality available in the country today at a reasonable rate, I don't know, it's something that we really need to think about, I think.
Well, I think they're picking up the ideas from Pebble Creek, for example. I mean, who have all the amenities that we see here, that are provided through fees, through home purchases. They're not for free, that's for certain. They're being paid for it. But I think you hit it right on the head, Robert, or Georgia did. Is that these folks, when they answer questions like this, they assume or they feel that the city should pick up the cost or provide something that's reasonable. You know, you talk to people that belong to the YMCA or want to belong to the YMCA, and they're coming back to you and say, well, you know, I've got 3 kids and my wife and I, and we just can't afford the type of rates that are being charged by even the private entities, such as the fitness centers, for example. So, yeah, I think they're touching, Georgie hit it right on the head. They're looking for something that is not to cost them too much, that the city participates in the cost of. So.
Well, I would expect that we would have a fee for these services.
Are you paying for it? Did anybody else up here play basketball or soccer or
Gymnasiums
baseball
or
or
something.
anything when we were kids? I don't remember paying a dime to do that. I'm not saying it was a handout. I mean, I paid a $20 registration fee to play basketball as a kid, but I went and had a pickup game at 6:30, 7 o'clock on a Friday night. And I think we have to discern if we're going to regentrify our community over a long period of time. I mean, this is a much larger debate than just our survey this evening. But if we're going to continue to regentrify our community, it has to be a community that's not just for the privileged. I mean, Lifetime Fitness is for the privileged. It's $140 a month for a family of 4 to go to Lifetime Fitness.
I disagree with you, and I almost resent the comment that you're inferring that I'm trying to design a community for people of money. And that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm just trying to, for us, if I could finish, I'm just trying, go ahead.
I mean, I think the point is options. It's not necessarily one or the other. I think the point is to have options. And it's some people may benefit from an open gym. Some people may benefit from a private club. Some people may benefit
Rob, I have to agree with you. And I don't think anybody's assuming that or contradicting what you're saying. I just think that we have to be very important. There is a segment of our population that needs meeting rooms, that needs recreational area. And it's my view that as a city, we need to be cognizant of that need. And it doesn't have to be as elaborate or as large as you're looking at the Lifetime Center, but we do need to have some type of facilities that is a nominal cost to people so that they can have those activities.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me.
Yes.
We're getting a little off agenda. Tonight's agenda is posted for discussion of the citizen satisfaction survey. To the extent that we start talking about policies, we may need to refocus here.
We're talking about some items that are coming up that are being discussed because of the subject that was brought up, and I think it's important for us to discuss them. This is a work session. What is a work session for? Well, we can't discuss the meaning of the items that we're looking at.
Councilmember Sousa, I certainly understand, and unfortunately we're bound by Arizona open meeting law that says we have to post an agenda about what we're going to discuss. Sometimes that's a little constricting, especially in this type of agenda where certainly it brings up issues that we'd like to discuss, but unfortunately we're bound to what we've actually posted notice to the public on, so what they're on notice that they can come and hear us discuss. So we've posted that we're going to discuss the citizen satisfaction survey, and if we start talking too much about, well, what are the policies behind a multi-generational center, it starts getting maybe a little bit far afield from our posted agenda. That's just being cautious.
All right. Thank you, Council.
So we'll get one started to have just to talk about this.
There you go.
So just to give you a little more information, in the north where Pebble Creek is, there were 69% of people who felt it was important, very important. In the other two areas, it was 85%. Where
I'm sorry, Paul.
Pebble Creek is not.
Back to what? To just multi-generational?
Multi-gen. Back when I asked the question, how important is a multi-gen center to you? That's the difference in the north versus the other two areas. So it's not a huge difference. There is a difference.
What's that mean?
Well, that 69% of the people in the north felt it was important, and 85% in the other areas of the city. So that was more important to the people in the central area and in Estrella than it was to people in the north to have a multi-gen center. Even though I guess Estrella has their own, Estrella has the same type of
that
thing.
from a senior center.
Yes, that was a multi-gen, that wasn't a senior center. Okay, where are we? Okay. Now, on we wanted to know whether the people feel that we pay attention to them on these issues and we include them in issues. And again, we were rated very high with 92% of the people feeling that we included them when we're dealing with major issues. And that was the same across the board, including in Estrella. So the other thing we asked was how many people have actually physically contacted us in the past 12 months. And it appears that about a third of the people actually feel they have to contact us for some reason every year. And a few more, actually a significant number more in the South and Estrella did.
I was interviewed in the survey. This is where I busted out laughing. When the interview asked me this question.
Whether you contacted the city? Oh, how'd you answer?
I say that's when I busted out laughing. She says, "Well, what are you laughing about?" That's what I said. Well, you're interviewing a council member. She said, "Oh my God."
Well, I hope you rated the next one high, where we said how citizens were treated when they contacted the city, and almost 100% of the people said they were treated courteously. Now, I just can't tell you, but that's a pretty phenomenal number. And so I think our customer service, and this city has always prided itself in customer service, has to be pretty darn good. And that almost 90% said in a timely manner as well. And timely, I know to us, is harder than courteousness is. Now, those are the basic areas that we asked that were the same in 2004 and 2007, where we could compare the data. That every year we use an area of the questionnaire to ask about new things, prevalent issues at the time. So the things that I was asked to put on this survey addressed the Public Safety Committee recommendations, building heights, our news publication readership, our internet usage, the curbside sanitation program, and new city hall hours to keep us in compliance with PM10 issues.
Those figures, the 92 and the 98%, the 98%, I think are important when you take into fact that in 2004, the population was not what it was in 2007. So consequently, you have a greater population that are saying, yeah, I'm satisfied to the point of 98%. And that should make all of us feel pretty good, or staff feel excellent about the way they respond to it.
Yeah, I think it is an excellent statement on staff that they have kept up with that customer service as a population grew. Okay. So now, the first question we asked was, the Public Safety Committee recommended that we again go for a fire sprinkler ordinance for new home construction. So we wanted to see sort of what the feeling is out there on that recommendation. Well, 68% agree or strongly agree with this idea. And it's strongest among the youngest. Unfortunately, the youngest aren't the voters. So we didn't ask if they voted. But this is one case where it gives you an idea, if you were going to go about a sprinkler ordinance, where the public, get some feel about where the public stands before we would tackle such an issue. Again, the other thing that they recommended is if the council felt that they needed to ever institute a special public safety sales tax in order to get the funds needed to get the public safety to where you felt it should be. They did not recommend to have a public safety sales tax. They said they would support the council if the council ever felt the need to do this. So we wanted to see how other people felt about this. Well, 74% are basically somewhat or generally in agreement if the council felt they had to do this. The only place it really showed a difference among the areas was it was least popular in Estrella. Sorry, I didn't change the slide to that one. This is the slide on. So
what's that saying now? Because Glendale and Phoenix have that on their ballot right now.
Remember, the Public Safety Committee did not say do a tax. They said we'll support you if you need it.
But what's this say?
Well, basically this says that 31% of the people are generally in agreement with that. That's pretty strong. And if you say, are you somewhat or generally in agreement, that takes up, that's 3/4 of the population. Look like they would be willing to support you if you said we need a public safety.
How was the question asked by the interviewer? Do you have that?
Says the Public Safety Committee also said it would support the City Council if the Council felt it necessary to follow Avondale's example and ask the citizens to vote for a small incremental retail sales tax devoted solely to funding enough police and fire protection to keep up with growth. Would you say you would generally be agreeable to such an idea, somewhat agreeable, or not agreeable at all? Sorry, I found it.
Thank you.
How'd you answer that?
Yeah, I didn't answer that one.
And then we were asked to ask about building heights, and about 50% of our population would assume building heights stay less than 5 stories, both at I-10 and City Center. However, the younger and the newer the resident, the more they favor the taller buildings, and people, almost 20% of the people are willing to go over 10 stories if need be. So your population is pretty well split down the middle on this issue, with slightly more at I-10 than in the City Center. Then we asked where the citizens get most of their news. Well, as in the previous survey in 2004, the majority of it comes from the West Valley View. However, there is a significantly fewer people who get it when you go from 75% to 64%. And the good thing is it looks like it was picked up by InFocus, which had 15% versus after only 6 months versus 8% for City Report after about 20 years. So we hope that that's a good sign. We ask about the frequency of our readership of the local papers, and 3/4 are reading the West Valley View at least weekly, and 1/3 are reading the Southwest Valley Republic at least weekly. Then we asked about the frequency of reading our newsletter, and that's one of the reasons that we changed to a direct mail newsletter was the results of the survey in 2004, where it shows that only less than half of our population, 46%, were reading our newsletter at all, and 1/3 were not reading it. Were not reading it at all, and only 46% were reading it. So we figured we were wasting a lot of money at that point, and so we asked to go in directly in-house. And from that standpoint, now within 6 months, we had almost 2/3 of the population reading it monthly, and only 21% who had seldom or never seen it. So after a year, by the next survey, hopefully that number will totally change. The readership in the City Report also was much older because of the demographics at that time of the West Valley View. What we found now is that the young people are reading the InFocus as well, which was a big problem before because we weren't getting any readership among the young people. Citizens with internet access, that has gone up, and the number's gone up too who visited our current website, over half. Those who visited say it's easy to use, and hopefully that will totally improve. We're going to revamp and redesign the entire website by January. Everything will be on a mouse over on the home page, because everybody wants everything on the home page, so they'll be able to get to everything from the home page from that standpoint, and hopefully it'll increase the usage. And we hope it'll increase the usage by age, because you see who's using the internet. By far, it's the younger people and not the older people. And this is the place where we can get information out to them 24/7. This is where we can get the information out the fastest. We have to get people used to going to our website, because if we have an emergency and things like that, they have to be used and hopefully know to go to our website, assuming we have any electricity and ability for them to read it, that's the best place to get information. Okay, then we ask about the sanitation program. How well was it implemented? Well, as you know, rated one of the highest services, and they rated it 8.2 out of 10 on its implementation. Then we said, okay, how helpful were the marketing materials? And luckily, 2/3 of the people said the marketing materials were very helpful, and that I think is good, because we spent a lot of time and a lot of money on those materials. We've asked 2 years in a row now, about the frequency of using the bulk trash. As you see, this time actually it's going up. Probably bulk trash is being used a little bit, like to replace the twice weekly service. But we still have 75% of our population that is using a weekly service less than monthly. We also ask again about whether you're willing to separate your yard waste. I don't think we have to bother doing this again. I think it's clear that everybody's willing to separate their yard waste if we so chose to do that. Then when we came to asking them hours we looked at how different cities handle the PMT issue, and some of them close every other Friday. We asked about that, and 67% of the population said that they would be agreeable to us closing every other Friday. Yet a quarter of them weren't agreeable with it, but 3/4 of them thought it was a good idea for us to extend the weekday hours. So that's basically it. I can go over in a summary, but I think we want to get done. Do you have any questions at this point?
Questions, comments?
Well, I just think it was really good information, and
It's great news. It really is
Yes, it
wonderful
is.
news.
yes, it is. Gives us some ideas to go forth on.
How do we zero in
I
on
only
that?
have one comment, and I just would like to thank the staff for their commitment of excellence. I think this percentage of high rating that we're getting shows that everybody is working to the greater good of the city. And just want to give them good kudos for that.
Thank you.
Well, thank-
Councilmember Lord?
I want to thank the populace for being so open on all the subjects. The response was what made the 90 to 92% figure to make this city the place to live. And that's great for all of us up here to hear.
Thank you. We should thank the people who spent probably 20 to 25 minutes on the phone doing this. And I think if any of us have gotten calls, we pretty much probably just go hang up. And so people were really nice to stay on the phone this long for our survey.
Thank you.
How do we zero in on the issue at this area? You know, they're not as satisfied as the rest of the city. We got a park going in that'll help. They're disappointed with their schools. How do we identify what is causing the lower rating?
One of the things we could do is we could hold a couple focus groups down there where we really get in and talk to them and ask them specific, let them start talking about how they feel. It gives you a feeling, and that's what we need of what's going on. It's not quantitative, it's qualitative. And I know the police has been having a lot of meetings with them because of their perception that their crime rate is high. And I think that's one of the reasons that maybe when we said, are we responsive to your issues? I mean, Australia rated us 96%. And that could be why, because I know throughout the summer the police has been having a lot of meetings with them. So I think maybe the more meetings that we have or we purposely try to do focus groups is the way that we find out what it is. Is there really a kernel of something going on that we need to know about?
Well, we need to find out what their expectations are, Paula. We don't know. I mean, obviously their expectations are something that we're not aware of. We need to clarify them.
Which is true, and whether we can meet those expectations. Maybe there's something that we couldn't meet if we tried.
Are they not feeling like they're part of the city and
More than anything else.
and Frank just answered that.
Frank?
Yeah, he was kind of talking here. That we're kind of operating the city and that everything's going on around them and that they're not really participating. And actually, if the police have been having a number of meetings there this summer, they might be able to shed some light on it, or some of the questions that they get asked, which I'm sure are not always about safety or crime.
We saw the same thing when we asked the question about overall quality of life in 2004 as well. It wasn't as significant. And at that time, I surmised, which is only surmising, that there was far less retail or anything going on around them, because everybody in the north seemed a lot happier, and that's where all the retail is, and all the things that are coming online, the Y and everything that's happening seems to be coming into the north. And maybe if you live that much further south and you're further away from all of that, that you wouldn't feel quite as satisfied with the city as you do with your neighborhood, which provides you with all those great neighborhood amenities that they do, the lakes and the Star Point and those kind of things. That's surmising.
Sure, that's a good point.
You know, what concerns me is the lack of interest that it appears that the folks in Australia have for the city. This last election proved it. If they wanted to be heard, that was the time for them to get out candidates that represents their area in this city. And nobody came from the area and filed for a position on this council. And this is where those people can be heard the best, is from representation that sits on this council. Frank does a tremendous job in making that point for the folks in Australia.
but I think we need more involvement, more political involvement from that area, and interest of the city as a whole. Not because it's Australia, but the city in its entirety. And it's not that we don't have a lack of concern for Australia, but they've got to come out and show that they want that type of treatment from the city. Not that we're cutting out services to prove our point, but if they have a complaint, then that complaint is answered by the city. Sometimes not to their liking, but it's being resolved, i.e. the police issue. So
I do want to point out, though, that it was a sign, maybe, of some discontent, because it's less excellent ratings versus good. But overall, they're still rating the city on 90%. Excellent. Still very good.
Well, don't you think, Paula, when we get some development up there where the grocery store and the park gets finished, that will give them some of the services that, may fill that void of discontentment?
I think with the park out there in the grocery store, I think we probably have to ask somebody from Australia, but having talked to a few people from Australia, they do say that they think that'll help.
The park will be, that amenity will help tremendously when that is done, if it's done properly. The other thing is your school system. The center of most communities is their school. In an area like this, it is, and in most areas like this, it is. And when you've got a separation in your school system, as we have, they belong to the Buckeye High School system. That really causes a breach. And I feel that constantly when I talk to the people, especially dealing with these education issues down there. They feel very strongly about that.
But Frank, I'm sure you pointed out to them that that's not the city's doing.
No, of course. But still, the city, it has nothing to do with the city. I think they're satisfied with the city. I think that the breach is that they don't feel fully a part of the city, because there's that break in the education system where they belong to another district called Buckeye. And I think that causes, to a certain extent, especially to people with children, it causes a slight breach in their feeling about the city. They'd like to see this all Goodyear. And I think you'll find that 100%. You go down through that community, and I think you'll find that almost 100%. They'd like to find some way to identify their schools with Goodyear.
And that's the type of thing that could be identified if we choose to do some type of focus groups or something down there as a city.
Maybe we can capitalize on having Gain there in October, and have Lily look at it to see how we can glean from these folks something from during that process to let us know why is it they are less satisfied than others.
Good point.
And declining in satisfaction, actually. So it's something I think we have to determine.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nice job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula.
I was going to note that, Paula, you mentioned on your In Focus magazine going out, I don't know if folks know, it's just traditional advertising. I think 2 to 3% direct mail response is pretty good. Paula's getting 15, so kudos to your department in switching from one media to a different media and getting out there. This may not be part of the survey result that you're talking about going online. I would talk about with your staff doing automatic feeds or RSS feeds on the In Focus, and those folks that want to subscribe to it can get updates on a regular basis. So.
And I have to thank council because you've invested a lot of money in agreeing to do this, mailing it directly to the population. And I think it's made a difference in how we communicate with the people. So thank you.
Well, it's a great and professional publication. It really is.
I do have 2 questions, Mayor, if I could. Paula, have we thought about doing the survey with specifically business owners in the city, as well as have we tried to maybe tap, we talk about under 35, but have we tapped the 18 to 24-year-old that maybe is using some services? I imagine the under 35 is more like 30 to 35 than it is under 30.
Yeah, there were not a lot of under 18. It had to be 18 to 35.
The reason
No, we have not tapped that age group. That's something that we can do. We can do it through the schools if we need to find out how the children feel and what they're looking for. Not children,
The
but
BMX rating will go up.
right.
And I'm
And the
actually,
businesses know we haven't, but that is something we could do as well, very easily.
and I'm actually thinking, I mean, we're trying to create a populace and that gentrification of, or matriculating from high school into the university setting. You know, I mean, I went down and talked to the Avondale School District during their orientation, and the teachers were thoroughly excited that there was going to be a university within a couple of square miles of the campus that I was on that morning. But it seems to me if we can get out ahead of that and start asking some of the 15, 16, 17-year-olds, hey, what are you looking for in a university campus? We can come back with that information to our university partners, to our city center partners, and so forth and so on.
And we could partner with them to do something. We can design it ourselves and send something out to the businesses and mail and have them mail it back. We now have a business registration, so we have the names of a lot of businesses we could mail to. Right.
Okay, Bob Coons.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you know, the city goes through an annual process for receipt of applications for major amendments to the city's general plan. Starting in April, May of this year, we began that annual process, and we've received 2 applications for major amendments to the general plan for this year. Just as the council knows, state law requires that major amendments to the general plan be considered by the council at the same public hearing and within the same calendar year within which they are received, so that the cumulative effect of the major amendments to the general plan can be evaluated at the same time. Again, this year we have 2 applications for major amendments. One is approximately 11,000 acres of Arizona state land trust lands located throughout the city. This is an application filed by the city on behalf of the Arizona State Land Department. And the second application was a request by Newland Communities to amend approximately 6,900 acres located within Australia Region 3, as it's called. To date, staff has conducted the required 60-day agency review process for the amendments, held citizen review meetings. We recently held a work session with the Planning Commission, and tonight we're here in work session with the council to brief you on the 2 applications. This is not for council action tonight, but just for your information and answer any questions. We'll be back. The planned program for this is in October. There'll be 2 Planning Commission public hearings in different locations in the city, as required by law, on the major amendments. And then we'll be back to the council in late November for the required public hearing by the city council and hopefully action. In tonight's work session, staff will brief the council on the 2 amendments. Brett Birmingham will brief the council on the Arizona State Land Department Trust application, and then Farhad Tavasoli will summarize the Australia Region 3 General Plan Amendment request and respond to any of your questions. Following those 2 briefings by staff, Newland Communities will make a brief presentation to council identifying their vision and future development plans for the Australia community and how the proposed Region 3 General Plan Amendment fits in within the overall vision and development plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett, and he'll brief you on the Arizona State Land application.
Thank you, Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council. As you are aware, on March 5th, 2007, the City Council approved a pre-annexation development agreement with the Arizona State Land Department to facilitate the annexation of certain trust lands that were in the Sonoran Valley. And associated with that agreement, the city agreed to initiate a general plan amendment on the state's 11,000 acres in various parts of the northern area of the city. And you can see this exhibit shows these 7 planning areas. We've tried to organize these into 7 different planning areas. There are no changes to planning areas 1, 2, and 7. So what we were hoping to do is to quickly go over planning areas 3 through 6. And associated with your staff report are land use comparison tables that further describe the acreages that we are looking at and the existing and proposed land uses that are changing. So what I'd like to do is just quickly go through areas 3 through 6, and then we can, if you have any questions, we can answer any questions that you might have. So now zooming into planning area number 3. This is 2 parcels you can see outlined in a dotted black line, south of the Gila River, east of Rainbow Valley Road and the proposed 303 corridor, and west of Estrella Mountain Ranch. So these 2 parcels are collectively 1,200 acres. Essentially, the minor change that you'll see here is that there are some custom home. There's a custom home area in Estrella, shown in yellow, east of the black dotted line, and to the north, the orange colored is more of a conventional development, more of a standard production home development. And so what you see here, the proposal is to change the classification adjacent to the custom home area to a rural residential, a more rural, to be a better buffer to the custom home area in Estrella, and also to add some low-density residential to the north, which would be adjacent to the existing Estrella Mountain Ranch subdivision that has been developed in production homes. And you can also see on this our consultant. We've utilized RBF Consulting to aid us in this application. They have analyzed the slopes in this area and helped us to better define the areas which we need to keep as open space. So you'll see the proposed area, there are additional open space areas in a little bit different configuration here.
Is that Elliott that's in blue? Yeah.
Just a second. That is correct. Elliott is shown in blue next to the A.
That A, isn't that state land?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, everything within the dark black dotted line is state land.
Okay.
So there are 2 parcels shown in this exhibit.
I got a question specific to your map here. Under the proposed, that right there along the 303 and Elliott, the northeast quadrant there, that little rural residential. Well, go back. You had the cursor. You started to point at it up there. Just up there.
I'm just moving the cursor and it's switching pages on me.
Oh, okay.
I'll just
Well,
leave
you
it.
see
I'll
what we're
just leave it
talking
here.
about? There's that little rural residential right up there at the northeast quadrant of proposed 303 and Elliott. And when I looked at figure 16, I thought I was comparing. Oh, maybe not. Okay. That's old. I'm sorry. I'm looking at two different things here. I've got figure 15, figure 16. Just proposed land use.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Vice Mayor Antoniak, the exhibit you see on the screen has been updated. The one in your packet does not reflect. There have been some minor changes that we have made. We had a citizen review meeting, and we had about 60 residents come out and talk to us about some concerns. And one of the concerns in this particular area was lowering the densities adjacent to the Estrella developments. There were also some, originally we had shown some commercial in that area, and we had also received some concern about putting commercial there. And staff, given the small amount of, I mean, it was only 20 acres that was shown, and a general plan amendment would not be required for that, so staff went ahead and removed that.
What does yellow mean then?
The light yellow would be rural residential, 0 to 2 dwelling units per acre. The dark yellow, bright yellow, 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre.
And the white is?
The white or beige colored would be rural residential.
No, up here in this one. White is 2 to 4, 0 to 2?
0 to 2.
Yeah, it comes across white on our screens. Here.
But Brett, you're saying that the commercial will be in there or will not be? You just didn't feel it needed to be,
It would require future zoning action, but not on
the
GPA.
Correct. Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Osborne, we have refined the plan as you see it now. We have removed the commercial because of the several of the citizens who live adjacent to that area have asked us to do that.
Okay.
So subsequent to that meeting, we have slightly reconfigured that to what you see up on the screen right now.
When you talk about citizens living in those areas, what type of properties are we talking about?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, we had about 60 people show up to a citizen review meeting. The vast majority of those people were residents of the county who live near this area, who were provided with notice. We did receive a number of people, 12 to 20 people who lived in Estrella, either, I'm going to point at this, either in this orange area here.
This doesn't show up on our...
I apologize. They either lived in the orange area shown on the exhibit or south of the Elliott alignment in the custom home of area in Estrella.
Okay, and you said something about buffering those properties with what type of property? What type of?
The area that we're talking about providing a better buffer is south of the Elliott or south of the blue line in the parcel that's noted with an A. The areas that you see in yellow east of the A, there is a custom home area in Estrella in that particular area, and it's shown as yellow, but it's actually developed at a very at a very low density, large lots, custom lots, and so the residents and staff agreed that the appropriate designation for the area adjacent in the state land area should be rural residential to provide a better buffer up against the custom homes that have already been developed.
Well, if we move in that area, don't we leave ourselves open to favoritism for these folks rather than the general public? Yeah.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, I'm sorry, I didn't follow you. Could you repeat the question, please?
Saying that these are custom homes that we're looking at in these particular areas, the area that we're talking about right now. You're saying you're buffering them from, we're going to provide desert land or some other type of property that doesn't have too much density that would interfere with their properties. And I'm saying if we do that, are we in a position to be accused of showing favoritism to the people that own the custom homes?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, the concern has been expressed to staff and to the State Land Department, and the State Land Department owns this property, and they have agreed that a rural residential designation would be appropriate, given as you can see, all of the open space designations. There are steep slopes, there's a wash in the area, and all of the members of the Estrella custom home area want to make sure that if it does develop, that it does remain at a density similar to theirs. A more rural density.
So you really are showing favoritism if you go along with that.
Well, you could say that. I mean, the other way to say that is providing a use that will make the existing residents happy, and the landowner is happy with the designation that we're showing here. So the Arizona State Land Department is happy with what you see here. So, and I guess I would defer any other comments to Michelle Green with the State Land Department, who's here tonight.
Well, my next question would be, are we, by doing this, if we go along with this, are we establishing a precedent for the City Council to follow in the future?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, I don't think we're establishing a precedent. What we're trying to do here is we're analyzing what the general plan has shown as existing, but we know that this particular area in Estrella has developed at a much lower density than what the general plan shows. So we are ensuring that any future proposal, the State Land Department will submit a zoning application to the City of Goodyear next year. And we need to make sure that the general plan designation for this property will be suitable for a future rezoning application in the future. And the designation that makes sense to staff and to the residents of the area would be for a rural residential designation. Have I answered your question, or?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be a better way to state that, to say that we're trying to make the lands that we are looking at compatible with the lands that exist? You want all of the residential areas especially to be compatible with the lands adjoining them. And I think that's how you justify it.
What type of acreage are the custom homes that are built on those properties now? What type of acreage are they on right now?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, I can't answer that, but I know we have some.
I believe they were the ones that we just approved not too long ago when we had the hillside discussion, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
1.5 acres, I'm told from Newland staff. Mayor Kavanaugh, council members, staff took the Planning Commission on a field visit to the site, and as we drove along Elliott, you can see this very clearly. You can see the orange area shown on the exhibit. You can see the more conventional development, the more 2 to 3 dwelling units per acre that's already been built. And then as you look further to the south, south of the Elliott alignment, you can see that the custom homes, much less dense, have been developed on the hillside. So after seeing that is what has led staff to provide you with these land use designations.
In the main, will this property be used specifically for custom homes?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, this is a general plan land use designations. It is the intention of the State Land Department to come forward with a zoning application next year. At that point in time, they would identify what type of densities or development standards that they would propose for this particular area. Is it okay to move on to the next planning area? Okay, planning area number 4. So this is about 600 acres, located south of, it borders Estrella Mountain Ranch to the north and east, Arnold Baker Farms to the south, and other private holdings to the west near Rainbow Valley Road. And Pecos Road serves as the northern boundary, Germain Road, the southern boundary. And essentially what you see here, in many of these cases, the state has recognized that since the general plan was adopted in 2003, there has been a lot of planning that has taken place and a lot of development that has taken place, and they're seeking to update many of these areas. There is a very minor roadway change that you see here. A arterial roadway has been slightly modified to provide for better circulation. But essentially, there are minor changes to this exhibit you see here. You can see the major wash area is shown on the proposed land use plan. Higher densities are shown in between the major roadways, and the commercial property has just been slightly configured to provide for more suitable commercial property.
Brett, was this, or in this area, last year when we had all was it McLean Holdings, all those specific spots that we had to change? Was that around this?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Osborne, it is in relative proximity to the general plan amendments that you saw last year. And you will recall that last year we approved a circulation plan that coordinated all of the general plan amendments. What we have made sure that all of these parcels also adhere to that approved plan. There are some very minor modifications, and we will outline those to the Planning Commission on October 3rd and 17th, as well as to you at your public hearing in November. Any other questions on Planning Area 4? Okay, Planning Area 5 is approximately 1,500 acres. It's west of Rainbow Valley Road, between Queen Creek Road on the north and Ocotillo Road to the south. The planned Rainbow Ranches community, which received an approved general plan amendment in 2005, is located north of this planning area, and one of the McRae Holdings parcel, which received a general plan amendment in 2006, is located to the south. And you'll note here that the land use designation of rural residential was updated to low-density residential to be more compatible with the surrounding master plan communities that are planned in that area.
Crossroads of that one again, north and the south. I see Rainbow Valley to the east.
Queen Creek Road on the north and Ocotillo Road on the south.
When do we have to have these general plan amendments approved here to be?
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, they are scheduled to be before you November 26th.
They have to be done before the end of the year, is that it?
They will need to be acted on this year. You will need to hear them and act on them this year. Okay, I'll move on to Planning Area 6, which is the final planning area that I wanted to discuss with you. This is a very large area. This is 5,300 acres. So this is generally located east of Estrella Mountain Ranch, south of Pecos Road, and Estrella Mountain Regional Park. You can see Estrella Mountain Regional Park in green. Planning Area 6, it shares a west and a south boundary with Estrella Mountain Ranch. And as you can see here, when the general plan was adopted in 2003, the entire area was shown as rural residential. And as you will see later, when Newland shows you their proposal for the Estrella Region 3 area, there are substantial plans for this area. This proposed exhibit does not show Newland's proposal. This shows our existing general plan. So you will note that the land uses that are shown on the proposed exhibit will complement what Newland is showing on the west and south areas. Again, you'll note that some power line corridors are being shown and some major washes are being shown through this area now that our consultant has shown us exactly where those are. And for this particular area, Newland is planning a very large regional center near this area, and so staff has determined that it is appropriate to update land use designations in this particular area to complement what is being shown adjacent to it and to prepare for the future planning and development adjacent to it. Any questions on Planning Area 6? As was mentioned by Bob Coons before, we will have two planning commissions at the, two public hearings with the Planning Commission. One will be at Star Point, and then the City Council meeting. As I discussed briefly previously, we had a lot of people show up at the citizen review meeting, so we need to know what happened there. There were 60 people, 40 of which were quite upset about the alignment of the 303 and where that was shown on the exhibits. There were a lot of people who thought that the 303 was the topic for the application. And so staff had to explain to these people who attended the meeting, residents, landowners, and land speculators, that Goodyear's preferred alignment of the 303 was shown in Goodyear's general plan and was adopted and ratified by the voters in 2003. And that We also had to note that the alignment of the 303 was not part of the application. The application was for the update to the State Land Department's land use designations. So given the number of people who were concerned about this, staff has been in contact with these residents, giving them information on the general plan, giving them information on the application, as well as information on the history of the 303 as it runs through this area. Also, very quickly, other areas of concern that were raised at the meeting, a lot of the residents who attended were very concerned about dense developments encroaching on their urban lifestyles. They were concerned about animals and property rights, and also preserving wildlife in the area. So with that, note that a detailed staff analysis will be provided at your next meeting, and this would conclude the presentation on the State Land Department. And if you don't have any questions, we can turn it over to Farhad.
No, just a comment if I may there. On the, I had several calls from residents in Australia concerning this, and they thought, as you did, that it was a meeting on the 303, and we discussed it, and I told them that this was a land development issue, and it was not the 303, that they had already discussed the 303, and secondly, the 303, where it was decidedly, at least at this point, going to be located, would not interfere with where they live or near their home, and they were pretty satisfied with that. So I don't know which group came to your meeting, but I think for the most part, once they see it, they'll see that that's, if the land development, if they want to be concerned about it, it should be how we're redesignating that land more than the 303. But I don't think that's an issue either. And I think you've done a good job with this.
Do you think the people were satisfied when they left the meeting, that it was understood what we were really trying to do?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Holland, I think that the residents understood. Many of them were very unhappy. Many of them were confused, and I think many of them had hoped that there was still another chance to move the freeway away from their homes. Okay. You had a situation where many people had very large investments and were told, that the 303 would be nowhere near this. That they went ahead and bought the properties, and so we did help them to understand it, and I think that they understood it, but many of them were still upset that they were so close to a proposed freeway, potentially.
It didn't solve their problem, but they understood it.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, the second general plan amendment proposal that will be coming before you is one being proposed by Newland Communities, and what you're seeing here is that amendment area as it appears on the existing general plan. And as you can see here, the parameters are Queen Creek Road to the north, Patterson Road to the south. And as I mentioned, this is the existing general plan. You can see a concentration of higher intensity land uses proposed, well, according to the general plan, at the intersection of Ocotillo and approximately Cerevel Avenue, and more concentrations of intense land uses as well further down along Riggs Road. And incidentally, this covers a 7,800 acre area. And Newland is coming before you with a proposal, I should say a request for a land use, a general plan amendment to the land use plan in that area. And if I could just kind of refresh your memory, perhaps, a general plan amendment came before you last year and was subsequently approved for an amendment to the circulation framework in South Goodyear. And what that basically entailed is, as Brett kind of touched upon, was a realignment of the 303 freeway kind of following parallel to the Waterman Wash, as well as Estrella Parkway and Cotton Lane, both more or less parallel to the 303 in Waterman Wash. And so this new land use configuration that Newland is proposing kind of builds around that new circulation framework. This circulation framework kind of helps define the land uses that they're proposing in this amendment. As you can see, there's still generally maintaining a more intense land uses in those areas that I showed you before, just south of Queen Creek Road and along Riggs Road. They will also be introducing the mixed-use land use designation that came before you in talking about the Sonoran Valley general plan, which the proportion of which would be 25% residential and 75% non-residential. And you can see those are concentrated just south of Queen Creek Road and just north of Riggs Road. This generally maintains the low-density land use designation that exists in the area right now. Currently, about 37% of this area is designated for low-density residential. This land use amendment would more or less maintain that low density at 35%. They would be introducing as well, they would be introducing a regional commercial mixed-use component, and that would constitute about 3% of the area. And this table that I'm referring to, incidentally, is in your packets. There was a citizen review meeting held back on August 21st. In contrast to the meeting that Brett facilitated, that we only had 8 members, or 8, I should say, citizens attend this particular meeting, and there was no opposition expressed, but there were many questions and concerns, but they were responded to accordingly. And Newland is here as well to kind of present this new amendment and their new philosophy behind this design as well.
Questions? Or? You know, this is confusing, and both presentations. We have to see this as part of an integrated package, I think, of south of the river. And you can have these subordinate charts, but it's hard to gather your thoughts along how does this affect that which exists, and really where are we? So it is what it is, but it's hard. It's confusing to me to understand exactly what we're changing and how it affects the adjacent areas and beyond the adjacent areas. But anyway,
Is the area we're talking about, is it 6,900 or 7,800 acres?
It's actually 7,800 acres, 7,845 to be precise.
Why are we considering such a huge area? To me, 7,800 acres is a tremendous amount of area to consider at this time.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Sousa, as I was saying earlier, the circulation, the amendment to the circulation framework in the area really kind of necessitated new land use configurations according to that circulation pattern. And that circulation amendment covers quite a wide area.
Well, has the annexation of Mobile pushed this along? Is that the idea?
I beg your pardon?
Has the annexation at Mobile pushed this forward?
I believe that is a driving force as well. I think that also influenced Newland's decision to come forward with this amendment.
It's not unusual for us to deal with general plan amendments, though, that are large in scale in terms of the size. I mean, that's not abnormal. I mean, this is where we have the most. I would venture to guess one of the areas we have the most latitude as a council to legislate land use that effectuates future zoning action and sets the framework for that zoning action. So, it's a bit of a broad brush.
That's my concern. That's my concern, Vice Mayor, is that we're making decisions here, okay, that are not only for this council, but of councils in the future. And I'm concerned about that. As the mayor said, this is something it's a big pill to swallow. And for the information that we're getting, through this type of work session, to me, does not fill the vacancies that I feel exist in this type of information. And I'm concerned here that maybe we're moving a little fast on this. For me to understand what you're asking us to do tonight is pretty difficult, and I'll admit that. It's over my head, frankly. And I'd like to have somebody, sit down with me and explain in detail just exactly how the two entities that we're discussing this evening mesh with one another over the long range, and what an influence this council is going to have on future councils by the action it takes here or sometime in the future relative to these properties.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Sousa, part of the reason we're here presenting this before you is kind of note some of the deficiencies, if you will, or some of the, you letting us know where we're on the right track. And
I haven't heard any deficiencies, though, being presented by staff. What are the deficiencies of this?
I have one. When you're done, I see one.
I'll pass to you. Go ahead. Tell me what they are.
This may be more for the applicant itself, but there's a huge changeover in the commercial, and or lack thereof, and especially with the previous discussion with Estrella's unhappiness, I question that lack of commercial is part of it. And so if you look at, we're losing 369 acres worth of community commercial and adding in a ton of homes. Great open space, don't get me wrong on that, but I am concerned about where is this commercial property going. I would like to.
Joanne, can I tack on to that? While you're addressing that, will you address the public, quasi-public increase as well? Because I think there's a big shift from commercial to public, quasi-public.
Maybe the commercial somewhere else. I just like to know where.
And kind of adding to all that, to kind of play on Councilman Sousa's and the mayor's comments, is we're seeing, I feel like we're getting to see pieces of things. And it's hard for me to put it together for a big picture. And maybe if we started with the big picture and then you drill down, it might have made it make more sense to us. So to us, it's just, we're seeing bits and pieces. Did I say that correctly?
I think so. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if it would help, next time before you will come forward with an exhibit kind of showing you all the general plan amendments that are going to be coming to you under consideration.
Yeah,
so.
okay.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, Farhad also suggests we have an aerial as well, so it shows some of the existing uses that are there. Right. I think that would show where Grandview Ranches is, for example. It would address Mr. Sousa's concerns, so I think we need to incorporate aerials as well.
That would help tremendously.
Farhad, can you synopsize the chart that Councilmember Osborne referred to and tell us, with these two changes, how does that affect future population, our estimate for population improvement?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Commissioners, I'm not sure if I'm prepared to answer that. I don't know if this is something that the applicant has addressed, but if I may, I'll defer to Kevin.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Appreciate the passion of wanting to roll right into the details, as there are a lot of them. Councilman Sousa has certainly appreciated and caught on to the fact that there's a lot of moving pieces and parts, and have been really south of the river for about 18 months now. That really began with last year's series of general plan amendments. Councilman Sousa, with respect to your question, there was about 7 general plan amendments last year that culminated with a circulation framework study that kind of came together to took a look at all the different 7 land use plans that were in an application last year, along with a general plan amendment that was requested by Newland Communities for a circulation framework. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, what you're telling me is we're basically looking at a jigsaw puzzle here, okay? And I'd like to see where these pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, even things that we passed here a year ago or 2 years ago, how do they fit into this now? You know, there's a lot of things that transpired in the past 2 years with this council.
Right.
And for us to keep step with what these activities were is mind-boggling. And for me to come in here this evening and see something like this, yeah, we reacted to this years ago, but I'd like to be brought up to date. Show me these pieces and how they fit in to this overall plan. That's what I'm asking you.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, I think that's a perfect segue for what we're excited to bring before you. Really, right now, if you'll indulge us with a PowerPoint presentation that myself and I wanted to briefly introduce Chuck Kubat, David Prescott, and Phil Luna, as you are familiar with from Newland Communities. That's exactly what we want to do in the next 20 minutes or so, is give you a PowerPoint presentation that talks about how Newland is designing the community as a whole, not just looking at the 7,000 acres in a vacuum, but really look at how that 7,000 acres, and yes, it's a large land size, but as the Vice Mayor pointed out, certainly the city has contemplated those types of land use decisions before, and we're excited to speak to that vision of what Newland is moving forward with as part of this general plan amendment. That again really stems back to last year's general plan amendment that was really based on a circulation study that looked at the roads, and now it's time to come back and update the land uses based on the advent of a Loop 303 realignment and a series of supporting arterial streets that really come back and build the foundation of what now transpires as good solid land use planning. And that's exactly what we'd like to do, is roll out that vision for you. And then subsequent to that, we have some supporting graphics that I think can help answer your question about how other surrounding properties, including the state land piece and some others, kind of tie all that together. So if you'll indulge us for a few minutes, I'd like to turn it over to Chuck Kubat to begin to lead that presentation, unless, Mayor, you had any other questions you'd like to.
Mayor, may I interrupt the process a moment?
Yes.
Because I'm not there and I don't have the ability to see what's on the screen, I'm going to excuse myself and ask that I be briefed on this when I get back, if that's possible.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for indulging me.
Georgia,
Yes.
tell them why you're not here.
Well, Ron became a midwife while we were here, and he was in the room when our youngest daughter delivered our 5th grandchild, a boy weighing 6 pounds 8 ounces by the name of Reed Sullivan.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Very much. And I'll see you all soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having us tonight, and I'm pleased to be a part of our update on a number of things and try to answer some of the questions that you've already begun to pose. I think this graphic was a part of the actual application, and I don't know whether that was provided to you in your packet or not, but it was something that staff asked for to show what we're doing in conjunction with the surrounding general plan amendments and so on, so that staff could probably do the same thing that you're asking for, is to try to see these things in conjunction with one another. I'm not sure that this graphic yet does that, quite honestly, and whether or not the staff is in a position to help answer that question further with this graphic or some additional information or not, that'll be something that the staff will have to answer. I think we've tried to begin to think about this region in a more holistic way. That's something that we're trying to offer, I think, to adjacent landowners and to the city, as a vision really for this southern area south of the river that's bigger than one individual 20-acre piece of land and so on. So with that, actually, it might be helpful for me to go into a little bit of this presentation, and I think it'll answer some of the questions that Councilmember Sousa has about that bigger picture and kind of how it fits together. Let's move forward here. I'm not sure it's not advancing here. Okay. One of the first things that we wanted to emphasize, and one of the first steps that we took is as a developer with this new land holding of Estrella and all of the raw land that represents and the raw opportunity, was to try and think about what guiding principle, what bigger vision did we think was appropriate for that amount of land in this position within the city. And the things that I'm going to review with you very quickly are the kind of 5 guiding points that we came up with that are going to be guiding our actions over the coming years. One is that we recognize that Estrella sits in a really unique position as if not the center, a major piece of this whole Sonoran Valley. And so we need to start thinking regionally about Estrella and our land uses, just like as if it was a city-like place. That it needs to be thought of both in circulation and in terms of land uses, and all the other services that ultimately will be needed down there need to be thought of at a regional level. Secondly, sustainability. We think that that's an important concept that's growing in importance in people's understanding of what it means. It means not just green building, it means other things, and I'll define that some more as we go further. Employment, critical to the city and critical really to Estrella. We think that people should have access to jobs closer to home, and I think you saw that in one of your slides earlier on about how far and how long people are driving. And I think so creating employment is an important idea. Well-being, we think well-being is beyond certainly just wellness. It also goes to spiritual, it goes to recreation, and all of that is an important part of what we think is our vision for Estrella. And lastly, but certainly not least, education with a difference. There's already issues that you've already identified with the schools. We think those are going to continue. We have actively committed to working with both districts and our own residents to find ways to enhance the system as we see it in Estrella, and find new opportunities both for public and private education and create opportunities for choice. To just give you that little bit of context, and we've shortened this dramatically from what we shared with the Planning Commission and with staff in other presentations previously. This is an interesting aerial view. You see the Phoenix Valley in the background and the Estrella Mountains there in the middle of the picture. And what you see is an enormous undeveloped portion of the region, which we've titled Sonoran Desert Valley, and a portion of that has been titled in your land use action as the Sonoran Valley. But it's defined really by the mountain tops, by the fact that it's south of the river, by some of the mountain tops that exist in the Sonoran National Monument, Desert National Monument. And it's an untapped resource, both naturally, both for the desert that it represents, but also from the development potential that it represents. And we think that over the kind of honest evaluation of that will be that there will be a lot of development there in the future, whether it's Estrella or it's other people in surrounding land ownerships. There will ultimately come development. So the question is, what's the character of that development? How can you do it in conjunction with the desert? How can you preserve and maintain some of those characteristics that the natural area has and flora and fauna have, and do it in a way that's probably better than before? This graphic shows that area now more in plan, and you see that we've got an overall acreage there of let's see, I forget the overall acres, a couple hundred acres, no, a couple 100,000 acres roughly. And the green areas represent both steep hillsides, some of the Sonoran National Monuments, some of the BLM lands. And in the middle of that, Estrella being in the red area, that you see lands that we think are more likely to ultimately develop in that region. The blue being state lands, and you've heard some about that, and already as that is changing. Some of the beige areas represent, there's some beige that's BLM, and then there's other lighter areas that may not show up on your screen that are privately owned. So there represents a good amount of land that will ultimately change hands and develop. What we've done is separated out the overall Estrella that you see here into 3 regions from a entitlement kind of processing point of view, and that's where we come to Region 3 for tonight. So you can see the relationship of Region 3 really to other parts of existing Estrella. Estrella already is in what we call Region 1. That's the Mountain Ranch portion of Estrella and the Montecito portion that you've heard about and so on that we're in the process of developing. All of that exists north of Pecos Road. The other areas are south of Pecos Road or in the future. And in fact, we're coming to you for Region 3, as Kevin said, in response to the overall circulation plan and trying to get land uses in conjunction now with that circulation plan and to create a bigger vision that, quite honestly, didn't exist when you put this area in Region 3 on the general plan back in '03. A lot of that was a guess. There was a lot of unknowns. Now we know some more today because we have a regional circulation plan. So we are trying to address that by bringing the two closer together. Couple things that are affecting this. First, I mentioned the transportation plan. This is 2 or 3 items that were a part of that. And the first one, and the biggest one, is the fact that we now have a 303 to consider down here. And it runs through a portion of Region 3 and a portion of Region 2, but it is a brand new constraint and determinant. Secondly, a major change that occurred through the transportation process was the extension of Cotton Lane further to the south, all the way to the 303, and in fact south of the 303 as an arterial street, instead of looping it to the west and connecting it back in some other way. We now have another north-south circulation route serving the southern area. And thirdly, the extension of Estrella Parkway as it existed somewhat in the past, now being redefined in some ways in conjunction with some new transportation thinking, which I'll mention in a minute. All of this then related to the overall circulation plan that you saw and you passed in February. So there's various street classifications here and so on that affect all of Estrella. And then you zero in on these are the particular pieces of that transportation and circulation plan that affect Region 3. So when you look at these diagrams and when you look at the land use map in your handout, what you're seeing is only these roads because they relate, again, to that bigger system. And some of them are named here, and you can talk further about that, and we can answer questions about that if we need to. Another important concept that we've brought to the planning of this is to try and build from the neighborhood up our thinking about what makes a great community. Not that no one has thought about that before, but we've tried to think a little bit more about Estrella as a naturally evolving urban place that has a combination, really, of different densities that is done sensitively to in conjunction with the desert, and starts with the thinking at a neighborhood level where people have their biggest investment, their most important possession, which is their home. And so we have other information that develops each of these ideas further. But what is a neighborhood? How big is it? What elements should it contain? And then how do you begin to combine neighborhoods together into districts or communities? You may have previously probably identified some of those as villages. It's a different terminology that we're beginning to think about because we want this to be more naturally evolved as a city. Thirdly, then, as you build this up, you begin to provide services. So not every neighborhood or not every community is got a lot of retail in it. And so we've tried to concentrate retail services and community services into areas where it makes a lot of sense, where you get that combination of uses so that they can be supportive of each other and, in fact, be stronger. And then lastly, the sort of regional core idea is what we've termed Goodyear Center Estrella. In other words, a concentration of services, really regional retail, cultural events, higher density housing, large open spaces like a park, business parks and so on can be concentrated in an area that we've called, again, Goodyear Center Estrella for the connection to Goodyear, at the same time an identification with Estrella. Where these things occur then on the larger scale is in this diagram. And you can see in the middle of the big circle, then that is Queen Creek, and that is the separation between Region 3 and the other regions. So what you're looking at in Region 3 are the bottom 3 sort of colored areas, if you will. But the middle one is this, what we've called Goodyear Center, Estrella. And that means that it's not all in Region 3. It just happens that there are land uses that are also regional and retail and commercial in nature that are a part of this, but they're north of that line and are really in this Region 2 area. So we wanted to point out that it's that this area contains all those things, but the chart that you're looking at for Region 3 may have differences in it from past land uses. Then the service corps that I mentioned before, those we see as serving a group of villages or a group of communities or districts, and we have one already there in the north. We're at Elliott. And I know that you've all heard that we have bashes coming to Estrella. We've made that announcement. We have that work is ongoing with our development partner as to how fast they can bring that to bear. But that was a lot of work to get that commitment and to get to the point of announcing that. We have another service center similar in nature that will have a combination of retail and service uses and community uses and open space down to the east of Montecito, and that's the second one. That's more in the second one from the top. And then the others are in Region 3. A couple ideas that are part of the plan concepts that affect all of Estrella, but again are a part of Region 3. One of them is the importance of circulation. So we believe that people need some choices beside just cars. And so as a way of doing that, we are introducing the concept of multiple electric vehicles being an overall planning element here. And so the blue loops that you see, in fact, represent opportunities to use electric vehicles on neighborhood streets and collector streets, but not on arterial streets. In addition to that, you have bicycle and pedestrian travel. Then we've got 3 levels of transit that we are trying to introduce and make a part of our planning for Estrella. One is that, and by the way, that was recognized in the citizen survey as something lacking in all of Goodyear. So the first level of that is regional bus transit, which we would think would use the 303. The second level is something that we've introduced as a concept, which we've called the mobility corridor. That's that north-south dotted line, dotted and solid, that can be used by both electric vehicles at some point of its evolution, but ultimately could be a transit vehicle of some kind. We've called that Goodyear Center, City Center Trolley, so that it makes connections all the way to the south, who knows how far south, whether it goes to the National Monument or it may go further south than that, and all the way to the north, to northern part of Goodyear, to 10 or beyond 10, we don't know. Obviously, the implementation of transit like that is beyond the purview of any one single developer, but it's really an important partnership that we need to have with the city and with other public agencies to implement that kind of idea. But we are making a commitment to the preservation of a corridor where you could do that. And so that's an important idea in itself.
When you talk about preservation of corridor, are you talking about preservation of right-of-way, independent and separate and apart from
a street?
Traditional streets?
Yes.
For both NEVs?
Yes.
And?
Yes. And here's to show you how we would do that. This is kind of an evolution diagram. We would preserve a corridor, which we see right now as being about 64 feet, rough order of magnitude. And when we would start with that, we would see that as being a meandering trail that could be used by bicycles and pedestrians and so on in the earliest stage. In the second stage, and as we get more electric vehicles operating and a need for a north-south connection, because I said they can operate on local streets and collector streets. They just can't go very far north-south because right now all the north-south connections are arterial streets. They can't operate on arterial streets, and that's part of the idea of preserving a way for them to operate north-south in this mobility corridor. So here you see then the addition of that path then can become the place where the electric vehicle can operate, and when you do that, you probably need to separate pedestrians from it. But we think bicycles can operate fine with the electric vehicles. That's more of the similar compatible speed range, but the pedestrians we would move into a new path. And then as more development happens in our mixed-use areas, that's when you could introduce the transit or the trolley. You need a certain kind of ridership level. You need a certain density to make that possible. That can't mean a transit stop every block, or you get no advantages out of the transit either. So there's a lot of planning that needs to go into how you implement a public transit opportunity. We see these as rubber tires, so they can move partly on this, and in some cases, they will have to move back into mixed traffic. For example, on parts of Estrella Parkway where there's no opportunity for a separate corridor, and especially if you want to move north, either by Cotton Lane or Estrella Parkway, there is not a mobility corridor up passage and corridor established up through some of those areas. So some mixed traffic is likely to have to be possible with those vehicles as well. So that's kind of an evolution of that thinking. And I think the last piece of this hierarchy of regional transit to sort of regional bus system really to the north-south mobility corridor then is a neighborhood circulator. That there has to be an opportunity for people still in a neighborhood way to use some very much smaller transit vehicle at times and be able to then move over to the mobility corridor, move over to the trolley line, move over to the service center, and maybe not have to drive in all cases. So we're trying to provide different choices and different levels of mobility opportunity. Another key component of the plan is really open space, and you noted from the comment about the chart that there's a significant amount of open space in addition to what we had planned before. We now know more about all of this, so we're able to start to integrate that. So you start to see the parks and open space, and then overlay that with a whole system of trails, including along Waterman Wash and up into the regional park, and connecting together a lot of the open spaces. It's an important component of the overall community. I thought I'd spend just one more moment to say about and define, what we mean by sustainability. It's easy to use that word. It's misused a lot. Not everyone understands all of what it means. And basically, we believe that over time, the concept of sustainability will change. It means basically that we're going to try to do things that don't affect future generations in a negative way. And that has more than just an environmental aspect to it. That's one part, sort of a three-legged stool. There's an economic part, there's an environmental part, and there's a social part that all have to be thought about to have what's defined as sustainability. And we think it will evolve over the course of the development of our community, and that we will try and respond to it in a creative way over that time and development period. At this point, I'd like to turn it back to Kevin for brief comments about the history, and specifically some more comments to answer your questions about Region 3 in particular.
Thanks, Chuck. Mayor and Council. Just briefly, it's obviously important to talk about the vision, how the community wants to come together in many respects. So my role is to kind of sharpen the focus a little bit and look specifically to Region 3, as Chuck mentioned. And as Chuck briefly noted in an earlier slide, geographically it's been broken down in terms of the different entitlement existing status or future development intentions. With Region 1, as Chuck noted, that constitutes a lot of the ongoing activity, the mountain ranch portion, if you will, with the newer developments with Providence and Montecito. Region 2 is kind of the gooseneck in the middle, if you will, about the 1,500 acres or so. That has an approved general plan amendment from the 2003 Comprehensive Citywide General Plan Amendment update, as well as Region 3 maintaining that same general plan amendment status. With respect to zoning, it's been a little bit dated. We got to brush some of the dust off some of the old documents of the city. At 1987, there was, if you recall the term, the Hidden Valley PAD. Really constitutes that about 9,000 acres that comprises Region 2 and Region 3. And subsequent to that preliminary PAD that was approved in 87, the owner of the property at that time came back in 1988 and got a final PAD for just the 1,500 acres that comprises Region 2, with the balance of the little over 7,000 acres of Region 3 maintaining a preliminary PAD status. So that's been on the books since 1988, just for all of our own recollection there. And with respect to the general plan application, Farhad had put the graphic up before. This particular graphic in the bold outline is attempting to illustrate the boundary of Region 3 with Queen Creek Road basically being to the north and the tip of Patterson Road to the very south. 7,845 acres and this represents the existing Goodyear General Plan as codified in 2003. And as you can see, the system of the road network, the lack of the 303, and a different land use plan altogether. So, as I noted earlier, with the advent of the revised 303 alignment and the circulation framework study that was culminated with council approval in January of 2007, that gave the opportunity for Newland to reevaluate the land use as appropriate and commensurate with that circulation plan. And so I know this is a lot of acreage and to throw at you, but basically everything in the yellow is the residential. These are consistent with the existing general plan categories, varying degrees of residential densities. About 5,000 acres in total of the 7,800 is residential. The employment categories, commercial, public, quasi-public, and light industrial constitute just over 1,000 acres. So there is actually, and when all said and done, there's approximately a 17% reduction in the residential land uses that were constituted the existing general plan, and a 13% increase in employment types of uses. So I just wanted to make an observation on that, since that was touched on earlier. Not to be left outdone with respect to land uses, as I think Ms. Osborne pointed out, was the open space factor that we're pleased to report to you all that is going to be substantially increasing, as Chuck had touched on, with the backbone of Waterman Wash serving as a linear greenbelt corridor that can be utilized for many park and other open space functions. But we're talking about an increase of 300 acres to about 1,300 acres, so a substantial 280% some odd percent increase in actual parks and or open spaces. Real briefly, since we want to entertain the Q&A and get into those issues with you, is that here's a breakdown. I'm not going to hold you to a quiz or anything on the acreages associated with each of the land use acreages that are provided. But in the overall scheme of things, as you know, the general plan offers a range of potential residential densities, the baseline on the low end and the kind of the ceiling on the high end. But at the end of the day, what you're looking at with Region 3 of Estrella is a range of anywhere from on the low end of 21,800 units to just over 41,000 dwelling units at a general plan type of analysis. Now, at the end of the day, as we move forward with PAD, where does Newland intend to land in that variation? Probably somewhere in the middle, around the 33,500 range is kind of a Newland's target to be looking for with respect to number of dwelling units across the 7,800 acres. And I'm going to give it back to Chuck for the final comments.
Thanks, Kevin. We included this slide really in response to the questions that we got from staff, in particular the fire chief and the police chief, about how public and quasi-public uses sort of stacked up in this. We have about 400 and I think it's either 66 or 86 acres total that we've set aside in this planning area for those uses. This is how the breakdown looks today as we try to understand how those uses fit in here. That includes schools and includes public facilities with the city, but it also includes some other things, civic uses, a museum possibility, the idea of a university campus, and other things like that we believe all are part of the makeup of an urban area, and in particular more of a city, some kind of urban center that we talked about, Goodyear Center, Estrella. So these are all areas and things that will be developed and consistent with our past development agreements and our future discussions as we go forward. So in conclusion, I just wanted to kind of reinforce that for us, we'd like to really partner with the city, as we've already been doing over the last couple of years, to really think regionally about this as an opportunity. This whole region, as the councilman has pointed out, needs to be thought of together. And I don't disagree with you a bit. And we have a certain role in that as a landowner and a major landowner, but certainly not the only role. And I think the city has a big role in that as well. We want to emphasize kind of a holistic thinking about transportation beyond just the automobile. that we want to really integrate the concept of sustainability in what we do, and we're working very hard at that every day. And we believe that the community structure will evolve past sort of a village concept into something that's more organic and natural. And finally, to emphasize your point, Region 3 that you're looking at is really one part of this whole. And we've tried to give you a framework of the whole to try to organize your thinking about Region 3. So we hope that helps, and we're happy to answer questions.
The developed area of Australia right now, the developed area.
Mm-hmm.
From that point to the southern point of Area 3.
Southern point of Area 3?
Area 3. How many miles could you say that is?
Well, let's look at a graphic. I think that might help.
3 sections.
This is 1 mile from here to here. So if you look, and existing development really is about from here north, this area.
Right. Okay.
Montecito sits right in here.
That's not developed yet. Okay.
Okay, and we're in the process of developing Montecito just today.
From that
but
point down.
From this point south. So if you said that's a little bit more than a mile, but let's just call it a mile for now. A mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 miles.
Yeah, it's on the street lines, yeah.
Is what? Street?
Well, on the east side of town, those would be the street lines, but that's your section lines.
That's the section lines. That's the way I did this, is basically by section line to count off some miles for you.
Seems to me that there's 4 miles involved in 5 miles. I said, it seems to me that there's more than 5 miles involved in here.
I said 8 miles.
Or 8 miles.
That looks long, but
That's correct.
actually,
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dick.
That's okay. The majority of our population growth is going to be in the areas you're talking about. And I've got to concur with Councilwoman Osborne that if we're looking at, let's say, less than 500 some acres of commercial property, that's not going to do it for that area. I mean, that population needs to be served. People are not going to come from there all the way up to Australia Falls to do their shopping. You're going to have to make some allocation of property in your area for something similar to Australia Falls.
Oh, absolutely, and we've done that. Actually, what you're looking at, if you refer to the reduction, there's some reduction in the retail portion in Region 3, but not overall. As I said, if we look at Goodyear Center, Australia as a bigger area that actually encompasses a portion of Region 2 as well as Region 3, we have a regional shopping center planned adjacent to the 303. So that's a major retail commitment that's going on. The employment uses, as Kevin pointed out, in fact have been increased over what is in the current plan. So we're thinking more broadly than just grocery store retail. We're thinking broadly about the whole range of retail that a community needs and about the whole range of employment opportunities that a community needs.
But in breaking out the figures that we have here, okay, in this report, taking into consideration retail and industrial properties, to me, my figures come up to 549, not anywhere close to 1,000.
Kevin, can you want to help answer that, maybe with some reference to the chart or whatever?
And if you're talking about people sustaining themselves by living in the community, working in their community, that amount of acreage is not going to do it.
Well, I might have to disagree with you. We've done a lot of analysis that talks about jobs to housing balance, and maybe Kevin can speak to that as well. We are providing enough land with the way jobs are calculated and the kind of industries and the kinds of range of jobs that we're talking about to exceed what the city currently has in terms of jobs per house And in fact, our own internal target is tremendously higher than that. So we really want to partner with the city about developing jobs, and we believe very strongly that we have provided sufficient acreage to not only provide the jobs for our own population, but provide jobs for surrounding population as well. Now, in addition to that, what you see and what you saw earlier with the state lands pieces is that there's compatible land uses being thought about on the state land portion, again, along the 303 and in conjunction with this Goodyear Center Estrella idea to provide additional employment land uses. So it's not all just Estrella, but we've done a lot of analysis on that, Councilman, and believe very strongly in the amount of...
You're going to have to prove it to this council.
Okay.
Okay, let's have others.
Before Kevin speaks, part of the problem that I had before I stated my comment was the fact that I wasn't seeing the big picture. All I saw was that the commercial was gone. Now, you brought the puzzle lid to the box and you showed it to us now to see how it's going. Now, I think that might help in this question is the fact that if you were to tell me that there was some kind of plan or strategy between the cores in a mileage sense, because it looks like your cores are kind of separated strategically, are you talking 2 miles? I mean, when we hear it in that sense, that might help us visualize better than trying to look at this map that you're saying, so help me out with that, because that makes a big difference when you're saying, oh, well, you know what, you're looking at this, but really that's only 1.75 miles, because obviously with the electronic cars, you are thinking close proximity, so that would, I think, help me too.
I think, yeah, the electric vehicles really work better in a local kind of sense, and that's part of why we've also talked about the neighborhood circulator as another idea to bring people to our commercial areas. But, and maybe, again, with the map, we could make a reference to the distance from the north, maybe from Elliott down to our center.
The very first
That's probably
slide
about
you
3
showed,
miles.
The very first slide you showed when you gave your presentation showed all the different core centers going down the line. We didn't have that picture.
Right.
So
well,
that would have,
that's the idea. I mean, in a work session to try and give you some additional information that you might not have gotten in your packet that wasn't a part of the formal application.
Include that for us, please.
Yes.
We can do that. Sure.
Okay, Councilmember Holland, anything?
No, I think
So
it's
this-
just a lot to take on all at one time,
Sure.
but I'm finding it quite interesting about your planning. And I think sometimes we have to remember, too, that all commercial doesn't mean that it has to be in one area or that it has to all be in a mall or, something that you have to, get in the car and plan for a day. How many of us have gone all the way up to Arrowhead and not even thought anything of it?
So that's the reason we have Australia Falls going in play.
Well, yes, but there were years that people lived there.
To answer your question specifically, we've got about 3 miles between some of these. All retailers need some distances as well. They serve a larger area. The smaller the retailer, the smaller the area, I guess, that they would serve. And so we have grouped these retailers and other uses with them to strategically make stronger centers, as opposed to having retail on every corner that in fact can die and is not as strong over the long term. So we've very consciously tried to concentrate some of those uses in ways that can serve a little bit larger area, also puts the impacts of those kinds of uses in a more concentrated place so that you don't have, again, retail edges against everyone's neighborhood and
3
so on.
miles is, I can swallow that. That's fine.
That's where we are.
Councilmember Cavalier?
No, that's fine.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, just look forward to the deliberations that I'm sure you're going to have that'll be long and lengthy at public or at planning and zoning. But just a couple of thoughts for you and/or for staff to ensure that you get comments on the Hidden Valley Transportation Study that's ongoing as we speak. I'm sure you all are staying in touch with that, and that's reflected in your plan. As that evolves, I would hope that more y'all respond to that in an appropriate fashion. As you talked about the transit corridor, and I looked at your cross section, I would think it'd be advantageous now that we've joined Valley Metro RPTA and Councilman Cavalier sits on that board, that we have at our disposal resources at the RPTA now that we're paying for in terms of planners to look at things and to comment on what will be the future transit needs of the area. And just a double check, not saying you're wrong in your cross section or the widths aren't appropriate, but 20 feet versus 22 feet or 24 feet. Today is small potatoes. Tomorrow, when we're talking about right-of-way acquisition and we're dealing with this in the long term, 20, 30, 40 years out down the road when we're talking about acquiring that dedicated right-of-way, 24 feet versus 20 feet is a big deal.
Dollars.
It's big dollars potentially. And then I'm sure, obviously, you've got a lot more documentation that's going to come with the general plan amendment, but we'd look to see when it arrives here at council that you've addressed the wildlife and recreational corridor needs between the Estrella Mountains and the Sonoran Desert National Monument. Just in the sense of, are there appropriate points that you're grade separating yourselves? Are there appropriate points that, if there is wildlife, and I don't know enough about what's going on down there, but I do know that, BLM is underway and very, very slow to come to the table to get their committee going on the Sonoran Desert National Monument. But
if I could comment, Councilman, it might help. When we looked at the whole area, it's one of the reasons that we started thinking regionally, because we recognized that there was an opportunity to think about wildlife movement and about openness and open lands. And if you look at a map that it's really not shown here except on that one diagram that we had that showed the developable lands versus the green area around it, that green area is in fact BLM land. And it's not where Estrella is. It's these huge pieces of land a bit further south from Estrella and also a bit further west from Estrella that provide an opportunity for major wildlife movement. Where you have development, you don't have that same kind of opportunity for an uninhibited kind of wildlife corridor that BLM land provides. What we're doing, and is very much a part of our thinking about the plan, I didn't really dwell on it with the parks and the trails, but the creation of what we have today are agricultural ditches in this whole area. So keep in mind, this is not the same kind of desert that you see in the northern part of Estrella. This is old, unused farmland, flat, almost no physical features in agricultural ditches. And as part of our thought is to restore some of the natural desert character to that land. And so these agricultural ditches, we believe, we need to convey a certain amount of water, and we believe that we're going to reconstruct, if you will, certain kinds of desert washes through this area that will convey the water that's necessary, but also provide both a recreation opportunity from a trail and some other open spaces and so on, but also a wildlife opportunity for habitat and some minor amounts of movement. You don't get bighorn sheep going through washes that are surrounded by development. But out in the BLM land that I've identified, that I've showed on that drawing, where you have 10 miles, a 10-mile stretch, that's where you can get that kind of wildlife movement. And that's where it is occurring today as well.
But I think the folks at the Biltmore would argue with you that their dogs are getting eaten and coyotes are coming down through the washes and coming down.
There's a certain amount.
Through an existence that very much was similar to what exists down there, which was, orange groves and water, conveying systems and that sort of thing. So just be cognizant of that, and if there's any lessons we can learn from that in the center of the Phoenix Valley, if we can apply out here, I'd urge you to do so.
In a positive or negative way? With the idea of being the coyotes and so on.
I lunch at occasionally at AJ's down at Central and Camelback, and I've seen a coyote shoot through the parking lot because there's a canal back in the neighborhood back there, and they run along the canals. And so while it's an unnatural desert, and we do have water ditches carved down there unnaturally, and we're going to rehab that. Wildlife is there, and they're going to go somewhere. They're either going to go in somebody's backyard pool, they're going to go to the neighborhood dog, or they're going to go down to your 10-mile swath of land down to BLM.
And there will be some movement, and that's, I think, part of what we're trying to do is incorporate that in a positive way to make that a part of that experience. If you live in that part of the desert, you're going to have some more exposure to that kind of desert
It can be
environment.
positive and negative.
It can be both, absolutely.
I have
And I
experience.
can add to that, because of where I live in Estrella, the wildlife moves up and down that mountain constantly, and they're going down to the river and back up to the mountain. So we have constant movement, and there's nothing to impede the wildlife and the movement up and down the washes. And in the main washes themselves, where you find most of the little creatures that go up and down. And we're not impeding those washes in any way. I can see in what you laid out there, that's all green area. And that will take care of all our little rattlesnakes and all the other.
And in fact, some of the ditches that are today, 20 and 30 feet wide, to carry the flow that's really there, need to be several hundred feet wide. And that's what's in fact happening, to make them a resource as opposed to just a ditch.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we'll move to council member reports on current events. Seeing none, city manager's report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the only thing I would add is more follow-up, is that on October 9th, we will be having a work session with council preceding the council meeting on the city center master plan. So that'll be coming before council. And as part of that, it may provide an opportunity to follow up on some of the discussion items tonight, such as the library multi-gen center, and a layout pretty much of where the concepts for the different city portions are going to be, as well as the universities and the private development. So that'll be coming before council October 9th. Unfortunately, I'll be in ICMA conference in Pittsburgh, but Jim will be here manning the controls, if you will, and he's gleefully accepted that opportunity. But I think it's important to get that in front of council. You will see a couple of changes to calendar items as we tweak and make sure that council's here for all those very important discussions. So you're going to see a little movement on the calendars, but we'll pretty much stay on task with that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a person at the Avondale meeting tonight. If you would have him give me a buzz.
That's correct.
When he hears that report on the item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, their meeting started at 7 o'clock tonight,
Okay.
so we'll get a report to you later.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.